Stories of the Northwest in the Walla Walla Garden City Gazette newspaper, dated October 13th, 1894. The Lost Cabin Mine. Wherever miners congregate in these latter days, mines of great richness, which have been discovered only to be speedily lost, is a subject sure, sooner or later, to come up for discussion, and scores of hardy and resolute men have worn out their lives in weary and fruitless searches for these golden will-o'-the-wisps. No story of this kind is more thrilling or familiar to miners than that of the famous Lost Cabin Mine. Many lives have been lost and years wasted in searching for it, for its mystery, after the lapse of 30 years, remains as baffling and perplexing as ever. In the spring of 1863, Allen Hurlburt, a miner who has gained much experience but small profit in the gold fields of California, found himself in Walla Walla, where he fell in with two miners bearing the names of Jones and Cox. The trio secured an outfit and provisions for an exploring trip to the eastern slope of the Rockies, and after a long and difficult journey, reached the banks of the Yellowstone. Here they built a raft on which they floated down to the Bighorn River. As the country through which they were moving swarmed with hostile Indians, they were compelled to travel principally at night, a precaution which prevented them from getting an accurate idea of the country, and so they were ignorant both of the name and location of the range of mountains, which was one morning they found looming up in front of them. They landed and set to work in a gulch in the side of the mountain. Almost the first stroke of the pick revealed a rich vein of ore. Hurlburt and his companions resolved to spend the winter in developing their claim. A portion of the provisions which they had brought from Walla Walla still remained, and game was plentiful. They felled trees, threw a dam across the creek which ran through the ravine, erected sluiceways, and daily worked their claim with feverish eagerness from early dawn until nightfall. When the approach of cold weather forced them to suspend operations, they had gathered nearly 2 bushels of nuggets and gold dust. The fortunate miners now built a cabin, fortifying it with stockades in which they passed the winter months. When the spring sun unlocked the waters of the creek, they hurried back to their sluice boxes and worked harder than ever. One day, Hurlburt left the sluices to go to the cabin on some errand. He had barely lost sight of his companions before he heard the sharp report of rifles, and Jones and Cox lay dead on the ground. From the top of the tree in which he sought refuge, Hurlburt left his hiding place, hastily collected a small supply of food, filled his knapsack with gold, buried the remainder, and then set off on foot in a direction opposite to that taken by the Indians. He wandered for days through the wild, strange country which he had never seen before, and finally, from the lofty precipice, espied the wide stretch of an open prairie. He struck boldly out over the prairie, and 3 weeks later reached the North Platte River a short distance from Fort Laramie, where he fell in with a band of gold hunters hastening to the newly discovered mines of Montana. He told his story to his newfound friends, and they persuaded him to lead them, if possible, to the claim from which he had fled for fear of his life a few weeks before. The party, which numbered several hundred souls, including women and children, wandered from place to place till winter came on, but no trace or sign of the Lost Cabin Mine was ever discovered. The Three Hills of Gold. A more ancient and still more perplexing mystery is that of the Three Hills of Gold. Some 60 years ago, a party of hunters led by a man bearing the name Peg-Leg Smith were trapping on the headwaters of the Colorado River. They made their way down the Colorado River to the mouth of the Gila, then struck westward over the Colorado Desert, hoping to reach Los Angeles. On the third night after leaving the Gila, the hunters pitched their camp near three small hills. Accident or idle curiosity induced one of the hunters to mount to the summit of one of the hills. He found its top covered with a mass of dark-colored broken rock, plentifully sprinkled with shiny yellow particles in varying size. The presence of gold in that section had not been dreamed of because of its singular appearance, and several pieces of the rock were carried away by the hunters. These specimens were examined by an expert who pronounced the yellow particles to be pure gold. Peg-Leg Smith at once organized an expedition and endeavored to rediscover the hill at the base of which he and his companions had camped so many years before. Before reaching the desert, however, the horses belonging to the prospectors were stolen by the Indians, and Smith gave up the quest in disgust. A dozen years later, the hills of gold were discovered by another white man, only to be lost again. A soldier stationed at Fort Yuma was discharged in the spring of 1860, his term of service having expired. One day, an Indian with whom he had been on friendly terms told the soldier that he knew of a place on the desert where plenty of gold was to be found, and offered to guide him to the spot. The soldier hastily collected a small outfit and with the Indian as his only companion set out for the desert. They returned within a fortnight, and the soldier soon left for San Francisco. In the latter city he met a number of old miners to whom he exhibited a nugget worth several $100 and a certificate of deposit for $120,000 worth of gold, which he informed his astonished auditors were the result of his visit with his Indian friend to the rich mine in the desert. The Californians instantly offered to fit out an expedition and reward the soldier handsomely for guiding them to the spot. Their offer was accepted, and the party soon started out. But the desert quickly swallowed it, and no one of its members were ever again seen alive. A few years ago, an old wagon surrounded by skeletons of men and horses was found on the desert some distance from Fort Yuma, and this is the only clue to the fate of the party that has ever been discovered. To still another prospector have the Three Hills of Gold yielded up their secret. In 1870, a miner who had been working for some time in Arizona left Yuma for Los Angeles. He followed the old stage road for a time, but in the end resolved to lessen his journey by taking a shortcut. Soon after leaving the road, he found himself in the Badlands, a succession of steep hills cut by deep canyons, which so confused him that he finally lost his way. After wandering aimlessly for a long time, he reached a group of three small hills and rode to the top of one of them to get his bearings. While taking a brief rest before resuming his journey, he glanced to the rock upon which he was sitting, and to his great surprise speedily discovered that the entire hill was a mass of decomposed quartz mingled with nuggets of gold. He emptied his saddlebags of their contents and filled them with the precious ore, after which he struck out for a gap in the mountains, and after a hard journey which nearly proved fatal, succeeded in reaching Los Angeles. The journey ended, he was stricken with fever and lay for weeks at the point of death. When finally pronounced convalescent, he called for his saddlebags and told the story of his surprising discovery in the desert. The ore he brought with him was found to be worth $7,000, and the details of his story proved that Smith's lost mine had again been found. The doctor who attended upon the sick man induced him to agree to guide a party to the 3 Hills of Gold, and preparations were making the trip when the miner was taken suddenly with a relapse and died 2 days later. The doctor has repeatedly fitted out parties to search the region in which the hills are supposed to be, but the search has thus far been in vain. Rocky Mountain News.